Hello everyone and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. With above average rainfall in Oklahoma, it's natural to think the soil would be full of water. But we wanted to know what's really going on below the surface. For an eye-opening demonstration, here's SUNUP's Dave Deacon and our Extension Soil and Water Conservation Specialist, Jason Warren.
From time to time on field days, you may see a pit open like this with a demonstration going on. But Jason, you had an opportunity to use these pits as a teaching opportunity.
Certainly. Last week we hosted the regional soil judging contest for college students from the southern central plains. So we had Arkansas, University of, and Texas Tech, and Texas A&M, and Kingsville A&M, and Tarleton. And they came here to hone their skills and then compete in their skills on describing the soil profile.
Why is Oklahoma such a great opportunity for a judging like that?
Yeah, well, Oklahoma is very diverse in its soils. Here we're in the rolling red prairies, kind of a cross timber type region is the ecoregion we're in. And so you can dig a pit here and you can see very different soils, and you can go 100 yards away and dig another pit and you might have completely different soils. And so these kids can come in here and hone their skills and train themselves to be soil scientists, such as the NRCS, and there's a lot of other activities like wastewater management type things where it's important to know what the soil characteristics are with respect to water movement, not only for crop production, for urban, and residential construction. It's very important to know what kind of soil we have.
So since we have the pit open, this was a great opportunity to kind of show our viewers what actually consists in the soil. What do we have here?
Yeah, well, we hear a lot about soil health and managing soils to improve soil productivity, but there's a lot of things in this profile that tell us the potential productivity for the soil. And so what we like to see is a nice, dark colored soil with organic matter in the surface, and the deeper that is, the better. Right. Those deep soils with dark colors, they're what we call mollisols, and they were formed under grassland, as what most of Oklahoma was at one time. And then below that, so that's the surface horizon. It's usually granular and it breaks apart real easy, kind of like cookie crumbs is what we'd say. And then below that, you're typically going to pick up a little more clay, and you can see you have more angular characteristics of that clod, or ped is what we call it. And that's important because that clay, it can hold a lot of water, it can hold a lot of nutrients. But you want that structural character where it breaks apart. That way, as it dries, it kind of shrinks and forms pore space. The water can flow down into it and saturate the profile. Right. And so it's fascinating. Guys think, well, a couple inches, that's a lot of rain. But if you go through a July and August where we have little rain and it's very hot, and you go out into a field and the grass is, turning brown due to drought, and you get 2 inches of rain, in a soil like this, that 2 inches will only fill the top 2 feet of the soil. Right. In contrast, if you're in a sandy soil, it may only hold an inch. And so when we look at soil water management and soil dynamics, it's very important to understand how these soils are built and to protect that surface aggregation and structure to where water can move in them readily, especially on these heavier clay loams and loams. And then the sands, water moves right through them, but it can't hold it much.
So if a producer doesn't have that beautiful topsoil that everybody wants, is there anything that they can do to help create that?
Yeah, just be thoughtful about your tillage. If we can move into no-till systems, we can start to get some of that back. Right. I mean, even there, it's a challenge to get it back to the original grassland system, but we can bring back a lot of those characteristics through no-till management. If no-till's not, if it's something that you don't feel you're ready for, or you don't want to mess with, one thing to think about is how much tillage you're doing. Right. We till a lot to control weeds. If we can incorporate some herbicide weed management with tillage to reduce the number of passes, because every pass with a tillage implement is going to decompose that organic matter more rapidly, and what we want to do is sustain as much organic matter in that soil as possible in that surface. That's what gives it a lot of that characteristics and the microbial activity. And so we want to be able to maximize the number of days, whether it's green cover or residue cover, and minimize the rate of organic matter decomposition. And there's a lot of ways to do that depending on where you're at. and what your production system is. But that's how we get that back.
Okay, thank you much, Jason Warren, Soil Extension Specialist here at Oklahoma State University. And for more information on that, go to our website, SUNUP.OkState.edu.
One of the problems that we see in calves that are weaned is coccidiosis. Now, coccidiosis is a protozoan parasite that infects the digestive tracts of animals. It's very species specific, so I can remember getting calls from people asking if my dog has infected my calf with coccidiosis. No, if a calf has coccidiosis, it comes from a cow. If any of the other animals, it will come from them specifically. Typically, we see coccidiosis following a stressful event such as weaning, or if we change a feed, or if we maybe transport these cattle some distance, we'll typically see this disease break. These cattle are infected with the oocysts or eggs. These eggs are passed through the fecal material of not only sick animals but also healthy animals. So it's going to be in the environment where you are. Typically cattle ingest it, and depending upon how many of those eggs they ingest will influence the severity of the disease. If they ingest a lot, they're going to get a lot sicker than those that just ingest a few. Clinical signs of this disease are usually diarrhea with or without blood. Now, in milder forms, you may not even notice the disease, but you do have some production problems, like you're going to have lower weight gains. In the severe diseases with a lot of diarrhea, a secondary problem on occasion is you will get prolapse rectums. When we treat this disease, we normally use a sulfur drug or amprolium. What we need to keep in mind, though, is that when we treat those severely infected animals, we have to realize that most of the animals that are with that group are probably going to be infected. So we need to do something for them also, like put a coccidiostat in the water or in the feed, and that will usually keep the disease in check. If you'd like some more information about coccidiosis in cattle, if you'll go to SUNUP.OkState.edu.
We're joined now by Department Head Jeff Edwards for an update on Oklahoma's wheat crop. Jeff, kind of an interesting couple of months for Oklahoma wheat producers. Give us an idea of how they're doing with the last few weeks of planting now.
Yeah, well, there has been no planting the last couple of weeks. That's just the issue. We really have a big window there. We got quite a bit of wheat in September. We had optimal soil conditions, quite a bit of moisture to grow that wheat pasture. That wheat has set roots, and I expect that we'll see a lot of cattle going out on wheat pasture whenever it dries out here over the next week or so. I also think that we're going to see a lot of drills running in the field. I think statewide we're probably about somewhere around 60%, maybe 2/3 planted. In some areas of the state, though, that's as little as 30%. So we've got a lot of people wanting to play catch up on getting this wheat crop in the ground.
We talked about that pretty big gap of when planting started and kind of where we are now. For those who are just able to get in the field, what kind of guidance do you have for them?
Well, we're in the 1st of November now, and it's time to up those seeding rates. Generally, in mid-October, we would say optimal seeding rate is about 60 pounds or a bushel per acre. What we're going to have generally with a later planted wheat crop is less tillering. So the way we compensate for that is by increasing our seeding rate. As we move into the 1st of November, I would like to see those seeding rates bumped up to about 90 pounds per acre. As we move into mid-November, if we're still planting, I would bump it up to around 2 bushels per acre, especially if you're north of Highway 51. The farther north we go, the more important it is to bump those seeding rates up.
With this rain, obviously, we see some beautiful green fields, but that also means there may be more pressure from weeds. Talk about that.
Yeah, we've got some weeds coming up, and I'm a big fan of the Barney Fife method. Nip it, nip it, nip it. We've got to control those weeds early. We do not want to let the weeds take any yield away from us. Go out there and inspect those fields. Make sure you know what weeds are present, you know how to control them and make sure that all of the weeds are up, and go ahead and take those control measures. And fortunately, we've got a great weed scientist in Dr. Manucherry, and you can look up her information on the internet and she can tell you how to control those weeds.
Some people have mentioned some issues with yellow wheat. Explain that. There's not too much to worry about though, right?
Not too much to worry about right now. A couple of things have caused yellow wheat across the state. It all relates back to water. The amount of rainfall that we've had, a lot of that nitrogen has moved deeper into the profile. And also, if you have standing water, it can create soil conditions where there's no oxygen, and the wheat will just turn yellow from that. It should grow out of it. Dr. Arnell tells me that we may be able to access some of that nitrogen later in the season, depending on how deeply that it's moved into the profile. I think he would tell everyone to go ahead and put out a nitrogen-rich strip, so you know how much nitrogen you need later in the year, and now's the time to get that done.
We mentioned putting cattle on wheat briefly for those producers who are going to graze livestock. What we're seeing seems like pretty good quality just from the casual observer.
We have, we had moisture early. The wheat, we've been a little cool, but we've still had a lot of growth on wheat pasture. What we've been lacking are just dry conditions. You get those cattle out there packing around a lot of mud, it really affects the gain. So hopefully we'll dry out, but not too dry.
Exactly. Well, no doubt you and your colleagues are going to talk about all of this and much more at an upcoming webinar with a special name.
Yeah,
give us a little perspective.
The OETA-TV. We did a few of these back in the spring, just kind of giving an update. We're using Zoom, and it's a great way for us to be able to get a lot of experts in one place. Our OETA-TV for this fall will be November 16th. At 8:30. I would encourage people who haven't used Zoom before to maybe get on 10 or 15 minutes early. You may have to download something, but it's really straightforward technology. It's a great opportunity to ask questions and figure out exactly what the wheat crop looks like in the entire region, not just one state.
Okay, thanks for letting us know about it. And if you're interested in that upcoming webinar on November 16th, we have a link for you at SUNUP.OkState.edu.
Wheat harvest in the Northern Hemisphere is all wrapped up. So Kim, what's happening down south?
Well, you look at the Southern Hemisphere, you're looking, well, probably less than 10% of the world's wheat production. The important countries as far as exports go in competition is Argentina and Australia. Argentina's crop's about 34% above average and around 2.7% of the world's wheat crop. Australia's is 25% below average and about 2.5% of the world's wheat crop. But if you look at the hard wheat producers, it's a much higher percentage, and they're extremely important as far as exporting hard red winter wheat or hard wheats and competing with the flour milling market.
What's happening in the export markets?
Well, if you look at the export markets, the United States, all wheat's about 16% below average. Hard red winter wheat exports sales are 35% below average. So it's going south this year as far as exports, and of course our price reflects that. Who's controlling the market? Right now all eyes are on Russia. Russia's front loading their export sales and shipments, and they're controlling the export market and prices right now.
So how long do you think it's going to take for Russia to run out of that exportable wheat?
Well, if you look at their marketing year, it's July 1 through June 20, and since July 1 through late October, they had exported around 614 million bushels. That's around 48% of their projected exports this year. At that rate, they will have all of that wheat exported by mid to late February.
It's been reported that Egypt bought some U.S. wheat. Can you give us the rundown on that?
Well, those reports are a little iffy there. You know, it was first reported that U.S. was selected to sell 2 cargoes, 60,000 metric ton, 2.2 million each cargo. Then it was reported that Egypt bought 1 cargo of U.S. wheat, but Russia may undercut that with lower transportation costs. Then this week it was reported that we may have sold another cargo to Egypt. So it's kind of iffy. The way the price has been reacted, I'd say that we lost that sale because prices have went down and prices aren't going up like we got another sale. And the final thing on that, is U.S. wheat was soft red winter wheat, not hard red winter wheat. Russia supposedly sold them 12.5% protein hard red wheat.
So with producers having all this wheat in storage, should they sell it? What should they do?
Well, that's a question, because if Russia's running out of wheat, if they're front loading everything, and we get out to that January, February time period, then, and it looks, the good news on the Egyptian deal is that the market is at least looking at U.S. wheat now, that we almost got to sell, or we maybe got to sell in there. So we're becoming competitive. So I think that's good news. And if we can start moving out exports, and we had above expectations of sales this last week, then I think we can see prices moving up. If I can't afford, another 40 or 50 cent lower price, I'm going to sell some wheat. If I can afford that risk on the price, then I'm probably going to store it and see what happens as I get out into the November, December, and maybe even January time period.
Alrighty, thanks, Kim. Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Hello, Wes Lee here with your weekly Mesonet weather report. The Oklahoma Mesonet system has 120 automated towers. There is at least one in each of the 77 counties. Occasionally, a tower has to be relocated due to various reasons. This past week, a new Mesonet site was commissioned for Seminole County. It is named Seminole with the abbreviation SEMI. This tower replaced the Bowlegs Tower that was removed due to trees encroaching upon the site. Wet conditions continue to be an issue for Oklahoma farmers. We had a few good days of drying early in the week, but rain came back to the southern half of the state on Wednesday. Stations like Granfield, Centrahoma, and McAllister each recorded nearly an inch. Thousands of acres of cotton are ready to be harvested in southwest Oklahoma. There was some concern as the temperatures cooled off toward the end of the season. If we compare degree days at Altus for 2018 versus 2017, we see that the higher than normal temperatures early on more than compensated for the late season cool temperatures. The 6-month totals for 2018 finished 476 degree days higher than 2017, which had a near record crop yield. Bowls are opening. Now we just need some good harvesting conditions. Now here's Gary with a summary of October's weather.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, October's in the books, and it was another wet and cool month across the state. Certainly did wonders for relieving drought and keeping drought from developing. And it looks like maybe the same is coming for November. So let's get straight to the new drought monitor report and see what we have. Well, we have the same picture as last week. Still, the only remaining area of trouble in the state is up in northeast Oklahoma, where those deficits continue. Those go all the way back to last year at this time. So that's the one remaining area of the state that really needs rainfall. Now, as we look back at the October rainfall from the Oklahoma Mesonet, we can see massive amounts of rainfall across western Oklahoma and also south central Oklahoma, but really all across the state, save for parts of central up into northeastern Oklahoma, had generous rainfall amounts for October. We go for the departure from normal map, and we can also see, again, large areas of large surpluses across most of the state. Now, the good news comes from the November outlooks from the Climate Prediction Center. We see greatly increased odds of below normal temperatures, especially across the eastern portions of the state. The far western panhandle, we still see those equal chances for above, below, or near normal conditions. For precipitation, again, increased odds for above normal precipitation across the entire state. So those two conditions together, those two outlooks, if they do come to fruition, we won't see any more drought developing like we did last year, and the drought outlook for November confirms that. In fact, it has the drought being removed across northeast Oklahoma, just that little spot left, so that would certainly be good news for the state of Oklahoma. Now, those outlooks don't say anything about snowfall or really what type of precipitation to expect, but in Oklahoma, I think it's safe to say, expect anything. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
To the prairie now, where SUNUP videographer Ed Barron covers a joint study between the USDA and Oklahoma State University and learns how eastern red cedar trees can impact the watershed.
Well, eastern red cedar encroachment into grasslands is a huge issue in Oklahoma and the Great Plains. And one of the big impacts is that red cedar uses more water than does native rangeland, which means there's less water available for agriculture and other uses. We've been researching what happens when you cut down red cedar and plant switchgrass in terms of productivity and then also water yield to streams. We're conducting the research at the watershed scale.
Watershed is a pretty standard approach in understanding the water yield or runoff in a given landscape. So the watershed, it is basically, if you have a location such as here, this low point, that means all water from that given location will eventually come to this point to be able to quantify how much water coming out of this watershed.
But how much water does a red cedar tree actually use?
It's a really tough question because it depends on tree size, the amount of leaf area, how wet the soil water is. We did some calculations, and a big cedar on a really wet soil period with a hot, dry, long day, it can use up to 50 gallons.
Of course, it depends the size of cedar. Depend whether it's stand alone or it is growing in a woodland. And also depend whether there is water available for the cedar tree to use. So, average a cedar tree for this site in particular, we did measure before the tree was cut. They use somewhere around 5-6 gallons per day. Before the treatment, the runoff from these both watersheds are pretty small. And after we cut the cedar, the runoff increased about 300%.
And all of that water could be going to places that really need it.
The runoff from this landscape are limited. However, those runoff are important for stream or for reservoir because humans need those water, and also wildlife, fish, they need those water. This encroachment by eastern cedar resulted in reduction of that runoff. We may have less water available for human use or for wildlife.
I guess what it emphasizes is for societal benefit, getting rid of red cedar in the landscape will increase water yield to streams. And that's important for all Oklahomans who take advantage of water that flows through streams and eventually into reservoirs. In terms of, say, cattle production, when you look at the native prairie, you can see the forage production that would happen with no intervention. And then obviously the ability to plant native grasses is there as well.
In Payne County, I'm Ed Barron.
Recently I took a trip up through northeast Oklahoma and into southwest Kansas and noticed a lot of fall calving cows with new, fresh, vigorous baby calves at side. These cows look to be in good body condition, and we would expect them to be after a pretty good summer that we've had and going into the fall season. We know that it's important for ranchers with fall calving cows to maintain that body condition on those cows into and through the breeding season. You see, there's research done here a number of years ago at Oklahoma State University where they looked at the impact of losing body condition between calving and the start of the breeding season as compared to cows that just maintain that body condition in that same period of time. What they had was cows that were in a body condition of about a 5.5. Half of them they fed to maintain that body condition going into the upcoming breeding season. The other half were allowed to lose nearly one full body condition score before the start of the breeding season. As they checked the pregnancy rates at the conclusion of that breeding season, they found a 21% difference. The cows that maintained body condition into the breeding season rebred at a 94% rate. Those that were allowed to lose a full body condition and went into the breeding season at a midpoint 4, those cows rebred at a 73% rate. And that's a substantial difference and is really going to affect the bottom line the following year when we go to sell those calves. We know that these cows, say they're 1,100 pounds after they've calved, nursing that calf, are going to need about 2.5 pounds of protein every day. Well, if they're grazing some of this very mature Bermuda grass or native grass, a warm season pasture in other words, or they're consuming grass hay, they're probably going to get about 1 pound of that 2.5 that they need from forages. So we have to supply the other 1.5 pounds with supplements. And so that means that if we're going to put out a high protein supplement such as a 40, then it's going to take about 3 3/4 pounds per head per day to meet that need for those cows in order to maintain that body condition. If we're using something that's a little lower in protein, say one of the blends that has 30% crude protein in it, then we have to bump that up to about 5 pounds per head per day so that we can maintain that body condition and have those cows recycling and rebreeding at a high rate this upcoming breeding season. Let's keep the body condition on them between now and the start of the breeding season. We'll be glad next year when calving season rolls around and we have a real high percentage of those cows bred and calving on time. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Thanks so much for joining us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime on our website and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone. And remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.